Over the past month, I've been using video games as a way to talk not necessarily about story or mechanics, but the complex moral, political, and religious concepts found within. Today, I'm using anime to discuss a deep philosophical question. Is the self all that could be known to exist? DeathNote is a story about a high school senior from Japan named Light Yagami. Light is the son of a police officer and quickly grows disenfranchised with the way violent criminals will work their way through the justice system, only to come back out into society and offend again. Seeing a potential for entertainment in Light's want of a new and better world, he's approached by Ryuk, a Shinigami. Shinigami is a Japanese word that means god of death, from Shine, death, and Kami, god. However, in some sects of Japanese Buddhism, there is an opinion that there isn't any particular god that fits this description. Sure, there's the Onryu, the Kijin, and in Shintoism, Izanami is sometimes called a god of death, but perhaps some of the best-known examples of Shinigami come from the classical literature of the Edo period. In the Eihon Hyaku Monogatari, a Japanese book on spirits, or yokai, published in 1841, there's a story entitled Shinigami. In this story, Shinigami are imagined to be the spirit of a deceased person wrought with bad intentions. These spirits were said to possess living people and cause them to crave death, often leading them to seek it out. The Shinigami would lead them down a road of self-destruction. In the next decade, a Japanese essayist named Miyoshi Shozan wrote a story called Upon Possession by a Shinigami, It Becomes Difficult to Speak or Easier to Tell Lies. The story follows a sex worker who is possessed by a Shinigami and invites a man to join her in ending their lives. It's said that a Shinigami enters into people's thoughts, making them think about bad things they have done and want to die. Because of this, they are generally not seen as gods, but evil spirits, ghosts, or yurie. It reminds me of the stern warning that Ryuk gives to Light, that being followed by a Shinigami brings bad luck. What then is the spirit that stands behind Jack? He's the one being cast in Light's place for the picture, with Madeline as Light's eternal rival and foil, an enigmatic man known through most of the series only by a single letter, L. Something interesting about the use of the letter L to symbolize Light's rival is Light's goal to become a god of the new world. In Hebrew, El is the name of the chief deity, symbolized by a golden bull. Specific deities known as El include the supreme god of the ancient Canaanite religion and the supreme god of the East Semitic speakers in the early dynastic period of Mesopotamia. Among the Hittites, El was known as El-Kunrisa. Names like Daniel, Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel use El as a suffix to mean God. For instance, Daniel meaning God is my judge. Now, with the cast set, let's dive into the main topic here. A concept that comes up in one of the main musical themes of DeathNote, the Low of Solipsism. But what does it all mean? What is solipsism? Have you ever heard of the phrase, I think, therefore I am? Cogito ergo sum is the first principle of the 16th century French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes first wrote this phrase in his 1637 discourse on the method, a treatise often considered to be one of the most influential works in the history of modern psychology. In the treatise, which served as Descartes' autobiography, he tackles the problem of skepticism, or the doubt toward knowledge that claims that are seen as mere belief or dogma, such as the belief in something like a Shinigami. While addressing some of his predecessors and contemporaries, Descartes used their approach to the concept of skepticism with some modifications of his own understanding. He reasoned that by doubting everything, one could assess the world from a fresh perspective, clear of any preconceived notions. We see this sort of breakdown in the DeathNote story. First in Light, who in my mind is representative of Descartes, but also with El Lawlet, who is forced to see the world from Kira's or Light's perspective, and calls into question his rival's skeptical view on life, being not only Light's contemporary, but also his predecessor. While the origin of solipsism goes back to ancient Greece, philosophers like Descartes treated the well-known framework for tackling It's a little too high for this. Epistemological discussions. However, Descartes' view doesn't give any real details about what the I is that is proven to exist within his statement. However, while Descartes laid the groundwork for solipsism, the term and the full exploration of the concept as a philosophical position were more thoroughly developed later by thinkers such as George Berkeley and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Berkeley, for instance, argued that all that exists are the minds and their ideas, which leads towards a solipsistic interpretation, though he himself was not a solipsist. Solipsism was later explicitly discussed in the works of Ludwig Wittgenstein and Friedrich Nietzsche, in the context of their critiques of subjectivity and reality. However, it's important to note that while these philosophers explored ideas that related to solipsism, they didn't necessarily advocate for it as a belief system. It could be that solipsism is the closest philosophical answer to what we see as the soul, and perhaps that's why it's seen in so much of the framework of DeathNote as a whole. Kira's theme is even called the Low to Solipsism. The Low to Solipsism was composed by Yoshihisa Harano, who has also composed music for the anime Hunter x Hunter and many of the orchestral tracks for the Final Fantasy franchise. You might not know that song just by the name, and I don't know if YouTube will allow me to get away with 8 seconds just to give you an idea, but the lyrics are quite simple. It's just 4 words long, and they're inspired by traditional religious expressions present in both Latin texts as well as in Christian tradition. As with other songs in DeathNote, they have been modified to fit the theme. Kira, Deus, Vici, Canti. Kira, God has conquered. Every time we see Light as Kira going on a killing spree in the anime, this is the song that plays. It's even the song that plays when Light finally kills L midway through the story. Although, for people like me, that felt like the natural end to the series as a whole. I did not like Mello or Nier. But then why, if the lyrics seem to be making Light out to be the victor, is the song called the Low of Solipsism? I believe it's because even the creators of DeathNote, Tsugumi Oba and Takashi Obata, understand that to believe only in oneself is a lonely existence. After L's death, Light has no true rival, no equal who is there to challenge him. Sure, he loses to Nier in the end, but not before accomplishing his main goal of becoming a New World God. Light's death is seen as a martyrdom, even garnering a cult of followers in the years that followed. DeathNote delves into solipsism through Light Yagami's belief that he alone can create a perfect world. Light's growing sense of superiority and his detachment from others as he uses the DeathNote suggests a solipsistic worldview, one where he considers his judgments and perspectives as the ultimate truth, disregarding any reality or agency of others. Now, this might sound a bit like narcissism, but there are some notable differences. Solipsism is a philosophical position that asserts only the self can be known to exist. In its extreme form, solipsism holds that everything outside of one's mind is uncertain, and therefore, the external world and others' minds might not exist. Solipsism is more of an epistemological or metaphysical stance, rather than a psychological trait. Narcissism, on the other hand, is a psychological concept often associated with excessive self-centeredness, a lack of empathy, and inflated sense of one's own self-importance. Narcissism is characterized by a strong focus on oneself, often at the expense of others, and it can manifest as a personality disorder when it becomes pathological. That isn't to say that there isn't some considerable correlation. Both frameworks have a self-centered worldview, a lack of empathy, and can lead to an isolated life. Both solipsism and narcissism involve a focus on the self. In solipsism, the individual may believe that only their own experiences are real, leading to a form of extreme self-centeredness where the external world and others seem as secondary or even illusory. In narcissism, the individual places themselves at the center of their own world, believing they are more important or special than others. Solipsism can lead to a lack of concern for others since it posits that others' minds and experiences are not certain. Narcissism similarly involves a lack of empathy, where the narcissistic individual may have difficulty recognizing or caring about others' feelings or needs. Both solipsism and narcissism can result in a form of social isolation. A solipsist might isolate themselves mentally by not acknowledging the existence or importance of others, while a narcissist might become socially isolated due to their self-centered behavior and inability to form meaningful relationships. The most crucial difference between these two ways of thinking is intentionality. Solipsism isn't necessarily about self-love or self-importance, it's about the limits of knowledge. Narcissism, however, involves a deliberate and often exaggerated sense of self-importance. So, sure, they share some superficial similarities in the focus on the self, and they arise from different contexts. One's philosophical, the other is psychological, and they manifest in different ways. The correlation lies mainly with self-centeredness, and that both concepts imply, but they're not synonymous. It's easy to see, however, that someone with a narcissistic personality might find comfort in the philosophical concept of solipsism. For a narcissist, especially a covert narcissist, who puts themselves at the center of their own conflict, the question of how can I be sure if anyone else is real means that their moral failings aren't grounded in fault or blame. Combine that with a nihilistic worldview where nothing, not even the self, matters, and you can develop a person who is so self-destructively self-absorbed that they just keep spiraling in a continuous cycle of victimization. A person who sees nothing is sacred, nothing is real, a world with no consequences. Terrifying. God, I'm literally shaking. I did not expect to hit that hard when I read that out loud. The philosophical worldview most often associated with Nietzsche is called nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophical view that rejects generally accepted or fundamental aspects of human existence such as knowledge, morality, and meaning. Nihilistic positions include the thought that human values are baseless, that life is meaningless, that knowledge is impossible, or that some set of entities does not exist or is at least pointless. Some people might consider atheism to be a nihilistic worldview. Scholars of nihilism, such as Nietzsche, described a world with no objective order or structure except what we give it. In his notes from the mid to late 1880s, he says that nihilism is not only the belief that everything deserves to perish, but one actually puts one's shoulder to the plow. One destroys. He clearly viewed nihilism as caustic, believing that inevitably nihilism would expose that all beliefs are sacrosanct, the result of a defective mythos. And this collapse of meaning, relevance, or purpose would be the most destructive force in history. What I relate is the history of the next 2 centuries. I describe what is coming, what can no longer come differently, the advent of nihilism. For some time now, our whole European culture has been moving as toward a catastrophe, with a tortured tension that is growing from decade to decade, restlessly, violently, headlong, like a river that wants to reach the end. Themes of narcissism and nihilism are present in DeathNote's other songs as well, most notably The World and Illuma by Nightmare, respectively. Both Light and L embody all 3 of these aspects in very different ways. Light exhibits strong narcissistic tendencies all throughout DeathNote. He sees himself as superior to others, believing he alone has the right to judge and execute those he deems unworthy. His use of the DeathNote to create a perfect world reveals his inflated sense of self-importance, as he believes his vision of justice is absolute. Light's manipulation of others and lack of empathy and desire for godlike power further underscores narcissistic personality. But L also displays narcissistic traits, though in a different way from Light. His confidence in his own abilities and intelligence often comes across as arrogance. L operates with a sense of superiority, believing he alone is the only one capable of catching Kira. However, L's narcissism is more subdued compared to Light's. It's rooted in his obsession with solving the case, rather than a desire for power or control. As such, L's approach to the Kira case can be seen as solipsistic, in the sense that he operates largely in isolation, trusting only his own judgments and methods. He's skeptical of others and relies heavily on his own intellect, often disregarding the perspectives and emotions of those around him. However, L's solipsism is more about his reliance on his own reasoning than a denial of reality or insignificance of others. And likewise, we see Light's worldview becomes increasingly solipsistic as he progresses in his role as Kira. He begins to view the world and the people in it as mere pawns in his game of power. His belief that only his perception and judgment matters reflect a solipsistic mindset, one where the external world and the lives of others are secondary to his own will and ambitions. And while Light initially claims to be acting for the greater good, his actions increasingly reflect a nihilistic outlook. As he becomes more consumed by power, Light shows little regard for the inherent value of human life, treating the deaths of others as necessary sacrifices for his vision. By the end of the series, his belief in any higher moral purpose seems to erode, revealing a willingness to use any means to maintain his power, suggesting an underlying narcissism where the ends just justify the means. Though there's reason to say that L exhibits forms of nihilism in his detached approach to morality and justice. He's willing to manipulate others, including risking innocent lives, to achieve his goal of capturing Kira. L's pursuit of justice is not driven by a strong moral conviction, but rather by an intellectual challenge and desire to win. This can be seen as a form of nihilism where traditional moral values are secondary to his personal objectives. Don't believe me? Look at the way that L acts when he's tricked into believing that Light isn't Kira. He completely loses his drive to continue on with the case. it's not about justice. It's about his own desire to win. In summary, while both of these characters display elements of narcissism, solipsism, and nihilism, Light Yagami represents a more dangerous and extreme embodiment of these traits, leading him to a path of moral corruption and ultimate downfall. El Lala, on the other hand, exhibits these traits in a more controlled and intellectually driven manner, which, while flawed, does not lead him to the same depths of moral decay as Light. What does all that mean? What is the low to solipsism? I believe it hints at Kira's true fate. See, this is only something that those who have read the manga would truly be able to understand, but I'll give you the rundown. In the DeathNote anime, Light's death is shown in a much more dignified manner than it is in the manga. Instead of passing away quietly, far from even his Shinigami Ryuk, Light is defeated by Nier and devolves into a cornered, mentally demolished individual. He cries, he pleads, he begs Ryuk to kill everyone and save his life. But instead, the Shinigami writes down Light's name, dooming him to only another 40 seconds of life. And at that moment, Ryuk drops the biggest reveal of the series. There is no heaven or hell. No matter what you do while you're alive, everybody goes to the same place when you die. Death is equal. No matter how much he begs, no matter how much he pleads, Light's fate is sealed. And as the timer ticks down to 0, the next thing we see is black. There's nothing left. Nothing. That's the low to solipsism. Kira gave away everything for the chance to be the one true existence. And in the end, that low was the nihilistic revelation of nothing. So, in the end, what did he gain? Just a heart forever stained. Okay, but why are they Jack and Madeline? Is this some kind of cheeky jab at the fact that Monolith the villain is a dangerously selfish person with a magic book of the dead? Kind of. Jack doesn't get mentioned a lot in, let's say, Mayflower's history, with good reason. So I don't really know a lot about him yet. However, what I do know, the more I research this for DeathNote, the more it started to sound like Jack. But Madeline isn't a good fit for Misa, the way I understand it. Madeline wound up being more like a bitter rival to Jack. Jack embodies the destructive combination of narcissism, solipsism, and nihilism in a way that warps his relationship with Madeline. His self-centeredness, disregard for others' realities, and rejection of moral values create a toxic dynamic where he sees Madeline as nothing more than an extension of his will. This leads to his obsession with breaking her spirit and keeping her under his control, regardless of the cost of her well-being. Madeline becomes a tragic victim in Jack's worldview. Her experience under his control is marked by a loss of autonomy and a struggle to maintain her sense of self as he tries to isolate her from any semblance of safety. Jack's behavior forced Madeline into a position where she must either succumb to despair or find the strength to resist and reclaim her own identity. And with that, I bet you're all dying to know what Shane and Martin are going to do about this. I guess you're just going to have to wait and find out. After all, Jack keeps getting closer. He may even make an appearance in episode 5. That is one reason why, after all, I decided to do this mock-up of the cover for Monomyth episode 5. The chain pattern and colors are present in both, but I changed Jack's shirt to black instead, to mimic the scene in the anime where Elle and Light have their handcuffed fisticuffs. Well, I mean, Elle's footcuffs? I don't know. On the original cover, the first rule of the DeathNote is written repetitively. The human whose name is written in this note will die. And the cross pattern contains scenes of the characters prevalent to episode 5. I had to get the special font to do the DeathNote title as Atonement some justice, and that's when I came across another interesting fact. See how the letters are tilted here? It looks like an arrow going through H and O. H and O is nitroxyl, the one electron reduced, and I am not a chemist. I am not reading that. But anyway, it has received special attention as a potential pharmacological agent for the treatment of heart failure. So I suppose an arrow through H and O might mean the DeathNote pierces the cure for heart failure, causing it instead. Graphic design is my passion, guys. Okay, but no, seriously, I'm kind of psyched with how this turned out. What do you think? Comment below, then like, subscribe, and ring my bell. Ask not for who it tolls for thee.
Voices rise, but I stand alone. The world around me is nothing but stone. Reflections dance, but none are real. Only I exist, only I feel. In the vast empty void, I claim my throne. For no truth exists but my own. I look to the heavens, but they don't stand by. The universe fading, an empty track. What is the point if I'm all that's true? I am the beginning and I am the end too. In the darkness I am the light. In the void I am what's right. No souls to save, no gods above. Just my reflection, the only love. A world that spins around my mind. No purpose, no path, nothing to find. Stars have died, their lights are light. Nihilistic whispers fill the sky. I hold the universe in my hand, but it crumbles like shifting sand. What is worth when I am the whole? What's salvation when there's no soul? I look to the heavens, but they don't stand by. The universe fading, an empty track. What is the point if I'm all that's true? I am the beginning and I am the end too. In the darkness I am the light. In the void I am what's right. No souls to save, no gods above. Just my reflection, the only love. A world that spins around my mind. No purpose, no path, nothing to find. There's nothing beyond, no one to see. I am all that will ever be. The world collapses into me, a hollow king, no destiny. In the mirror I find my throne. In the end I'm still alone. In the darkness I am the light. In the void I am what's right. No souls to save, no gods above. Just my reflection, the only love. A world that spins around my mind. No purpose, no path, nothing to find. In the void I reign supreme, but in the silence I hear the scream of a world I lost or never knew. But does it matter if it's not true?
And now that this Scythian ship has sailed, art for this week is by Narufumi. It came out really well, and this is the second time we've used them. Actually, for a picture of Jack. Remember the Iraqi-style Martin, Imel, and Jack? Come to think of it, Dio and Light are kind of similar, aren't they? Well, see you guys next week. Art for this channel wouldn't even be possible, however, without the help of our patrons. Monetization on YouTube is not enough to keep us going, so please follow the Patreon link down in the description to help Tales of Atonement keep going long term. We have a lot left to do and a big story to tell, and we simply can't do it without your help. Besides, there's a ton of extras only available on Patreon that won't be available for months on YouTube, if ever. Some of our great patrons include Pammy Poo, Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Moreland, and Lunder Lumen. Thank you all for watching and supporting our story.